so it's there and available for you so you can work smarter and be more efficient. Because what we find is that the average person loses a whole day a week in productivity, 2 hours a day, just looking for stuff to do their job. So obviously that's why we're trying to bring this all in there together. So that's the workspace demo. You have another slide here to present between you?
So that's kind of what's occurring on the front end from a user experience standpoint. Taking everything that we control kind of in the shadows from a technology standpoint, wrapping it all up into one user experience. Now, how does this look from an administration standpoint? If for a lot of those in the room, a lot of you are virtual app and desktop customers today. Now, when you're moving towards Citrix Cloud, like Scott mentioned, it is a control plane. It is a way for you to orchestrate all the different services that exist from a Citrix product portfolio, all within one location. When we look at the virtual app and desktop stack, what you'll notice on the screen once we get to the architecture is that your workloads, while we're hosting that control plane, your workloads can exist where they need to be, close to your user data, close to your application backend data, all while you're orchestrating across potentially multiple clouds, multiple Azure regions, for example, multiple data centers, all from the Citrix Cloud control plane. The way we do this is through the concept of a cloud connector. It establishes a resource location that is your data center, and then it allows you through outbound 443 access, control those VDAs, control those virtual apps, control those virtual desktops. Now, for those in the room that are existing Citrix customers, maybe facing a 6.5 migration or going through upgrade cycles on your Zen Desktop 7.15 LTSR, we want to go current release. That's time that's associated with that as an administrator. Time spent on upgrading, time spent on moving towards the latest features rather than innovating and driving greater levels of business value by engaging your end users, trying to identify new use cases. Shifting that control plane to Citrix Cloud allows our team to maintain that release cycle without having to sacrifice the security of housing your applications within your control, within your data center. For those in the room that might have invested in Storefront and NetScaler, and we want to move away from that upgrade cycle of 7.15, we want to be on the latest. We went through that 6.5 migration. We never want to go through that again. But we have NetScaler and Storefront on premise. You can leverage Citrix Cloud and aggregate that into your existing access plane as you start working towards Workspace. So we've orchestrated and architected Citrix Cloud in a way that allows you to transition at a pace that makes the most sense for your organization. Whether it be aggregating your existing on-premise site into Workspace, whether it be shifting your control plane of your delivery controllers, your databases into Citrix Cloud and managing your VDAs through that, but wanting to do it in a way that allows you to transition by aggregating the storefront, you can move at a pace that makes the most sense for you. And we'll kind of go through now, switch back and kind of get into a little bit of the admin experience.
Yeah, and also the Azure Virtual Desktop.
Exactly.
Yeah, so there's some talk you may have heard out there about WVD, okay? Windows Virtual Desktop, and yeah, you keep hearing all this stuff going on. I will be demoing Teams here in a minute, but we're sharing an account, so that's why that's going on. So that's why you hear all the noise. So I'm inside of a virtual desktop, and this desktop, in case you're wondering, is of course hosted in this particular case in Azure. You can see it's coming out of Des Moines. We are, of course, brokering this entire thing through Citrix Cloud and using gateway services in the cloud as well. So a couple of things. This is a fully integrated desktop. This particular desktop is Windows 10. One of the big differences that we have today versus what will be coming, and please correct me if I get off track here, is that as the M365 entitlements mature, the Windows 10 virtual desktop will become multi-win. That's very exciting to me as a Citrite because that means a workstation OS can have multiple users having sessions on it at once. We aren't quite there yet. That's coming. I'm on the right track, right? You're keeping me honest. So we have a single user on this particular Windows 10. But a couple of things about the integrations. So I'm going to go here just as if I'm working on whatever device I have, and if I go down here to my files within Explorer, sure enough you see Office 365. I've got a OneDrive for Business connector right there. If I had SharePoint, it would be there too. And if I want to go on ahead and open up that particular spreadsheet, opens right up. You'll notice right here it's logged me in with my City One credential, which by the way is my M365 license. So Microsoft at this point has provided me with the license to have a Windows Virtual Desktop or to run Windows 10 in the cloud. Microsoft has provided me with the OneDrive for Business, and they provided me with the ability to use the Office apps. Okay. Now, in addition to that, Citrix is providing the mechanism to manage all of that, to provide that rich HDX experience, and to have these services available to me on any device I choose. I don't just always have to go inside of a desktop to get access to it. So a couple of other things here. If I go into email, Outlook, one of the things that we can do, again, tight integration. We all have had this situation where you need to send somebody something, right? And so we click on that little paper clip there, and once you've sent it, I send it to Dan, he sends it to Kevin, who sends it to Jeff, and I have no idea in 5 days who has access to what. So I've lost control of it. Well, that's where Citrix Files comes into this equation, and I'll go in here and attach files using custom settings from Citrix Files. And you can see here I can turn on things like notification, time for the links to expire, how many times you can access, all the way down to just one access for that one person. And the ability to do other things with some more advanced things that I don't have here, like maybe only make it available online with a watermark. So I'm going to go ahead and just choose that. And in this particular case, I'm going to close this out, go down to my OneDrive for Business, take a look at that document or that spreadsheet I was just working on, and just like that, I can now send that off to somebody and have a record of what's going on, who's accessed it. I love to tell this story. I'll make it very quick. I had a homeowner's insurance claim on my mom's house last year. Flooded her basement. I should never be a plumber. It was bad. Dan knows. It was bad. So I had to get some things going to get her house back up in order, and I was paying it on my credit card. So the adjuster comes and said, I've already put out some money and I'd like to be reimbursed. He said, just send me the receipts and I'll get back to you. So I scanned all the receipts, I put them into Citrix Files, and I sent them to him in the exact same way I'm showing you right now. Nothing happened, and so about 5 weeks later I went to see my insurance agent and I said, he's not even looking at them. She goes, well, how do you know? So I sent them to her. I said, now open them. She opened them and I showed her on my phone. See, I got a notification that you just opened those. She was on the phone immediately and got on a great insurance settlement. All right, so we want to talk a little bit about the multimedia aspect of this. And Dan, this is where you get to be my assistant. One of the things that we bring to the table here in a big way is Teams optimization. So I'm going to go in here and go to, where is my Teams? Did I close it? There's Teams right there. Go into Teams and bring it up. And right now I've got it on the Chrome browser. A little bit about where we're going with this. You will notice as I move that around, you see the dock plane there kind of keeping up. Kevin brought this up earlier. We have a Chromium browser embedded in Workspace, so we're going to redirect that multimedia experience of Teams to the local device and take the work off of the VDA so that we have a very good experience. So we're going to actually test the Teams call here, and I'm going to hit mute here. Dan, you can take that. I'll wait till Dan gets to the back of the room, and I'll answer. And he has to answer and show his camera. There he is. Hi, Dan.
There's a party out here.
There's a party out there, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, so now you guys can see that, moving it all around on the screen. The other big advantage here is, if you look at what's going on, your virtual host is not getting hit hardly at all with that multimedia experience. Dan, you look good, man. Everybody say hi, Dan.
Not too bad.
So we are doing this right now through browser content redirection. We can redirect a lot of content for things like other conferencing services, multimedia services, so on and so forth. But you'll notice I have the full Teams app on here. We're also going to build an offload engine just for the full Teams app. All right, Dan, I think we've demoed that part. See you later, man. All right, so cut him off. Sorry. One last thing to show you guys, and that's I'm sure you would like to know how this all comes together from the admin side. So I'm going to go out to cloud.citrix.com and just log in with my username and password. And now, this is Citrix Cloud. So all that stuff that fed the workspace, this is where I manage it from. And that can be stuff that's still on-prem or stuff that's hosted in Azure, as you've seen right here. I didn't show you this, but I'll talk about it here in a second. I actually have a server host sitting on my desk on a little Intel NUC that shows up in here because it's a local resource zone. But if you can see here, the access control service that you see up here in the corner, that was making sure I didn't go to those bad sites like Pirate Bay. Analytics, we're going to talk more about that in a moment. Content collaboration, that was that bridge, that connection, if you will, to OneDrive for Business. It brought all the files into the workspace, into the modern WVD desktop that I just showed you. Endpoint management, we'll talk about more in a moment. The gateway service was in use here, and of course there's the virtual apps and desktop service down here at the bottom. That's what delivered the HDX experience for me. So the first thing I'm going to do is go in and talk a little bit about the resource locations involved in our demo. And if you look here, I have a couple of things. I have the Roadshow Azure, and let's talk about what it takes to set this thing up. Basically, it's one of the easiest things in the world. Wherever your resource zone is, you start with a Windows server and probably a second Windows server, and you install something we call the connector software on there, and that creates a resource zone. We called ours Roadshow Azure, have two connectors. You'll notice private cloud data center, that's Scott Lane's house, for what it's worth. But I only have one VDA, or one connector there running there. The other thing that's kind of important to note is that I can control, whoops, get on the right one here. Oh, where's it at? Oh. Okay. Oh, it's on another pane, sorry. Go back to where it is. I can control a lot of things about how the workspace is configured. Okay, first of all, I can change that URL. We actually made it something really nice. Roadshow is our URL. We can do some things around how we connect the gateway to it. And if you look at this, a lot of you may already have NetScaler gateway services on-prem. Well, in that particular case, I can go here and do a local gateway, go local. Okay, and I can add it and then click save and test the STA configuration to it, and away I go. And now I can just route everything back to that local gateway, or I can use gateway as a service if I want to. Were you about to say something?
Oh, well, actually, I think a good point. So the gateway as a service, you're taking that NetScaler secure access. It's then that ICA is then going to proxy from that VDA to a NetScaler point of presence. So being able to provide secure remote access without having to deploy that additional infrastructure, but then leveraging each resource location as its own, whether it be an Azure data center, a on-prem private cloud, you can control the access and you can mix and match between the cloud service versus what you may have already invested in from a Citrix perspective. How does this differ in terms of architecture from what some of you may be used to from a 7.x standpoint? Looking at another data center, say Azure, for example, we have a cloud initiative. We need to start forklifting some workloads into Azure. From a standard traditional architecture, that's potentially another site. That's configurations that then need to be replicated, especially if you're going to Azure for DR purposes. That's other sets of controllers, director, having to aggregate those two locations and maintain configurations across both of them to provide a similar experience. By centralizing that management experience in the cloud, you also drive down architectural complexity. Being able to leverage multiple Azure regions, for example, say you have East Coast, West Coast users, instead of doing two separate sites, adding more management overhead, we're going to do separate sets of connectors. We've already set up NetScaler VPX within Azure East. We need that additional capacity, and we've just based on some of our security parameters, we want people connecting to a VPX in Azure. Let's configure that within this cloud service. But at the West Coast, it's interns, less secure requirements. We can keep it simpler. Let's leverage the gateway service because we're going to leverage that to just drive down the overall cost of ownership of that use case because it's something that's not as business critical. So you have that flexibility. You have the ability to leverage what you've done today, and like I mentioned, just phase into the cloud and offload some of that management overhead so you can focus more on driving business value.
Not to mention that anytime we use the gateway as a service, That's just one less thing you have to set up on-prem if you don't already have it on-prem. And it's very easy to get going, okay? The other thing is, let's see here, we have the ability to link into other, and more will be coming here, but to link into other sources of authentication, Azure ADP, we could do one-time tokens on here as well. It doesn't show up in mine because I don't have it turned on. Dan and I, Dan did the customization for our intelligent workspace, Citrix and Microsoft here. If I go back to the storefront URL off the front, this is the branding that you see, so we can brand it, and then we can do some other things here around sites. So let's talk about this for a second. When we talk about those 2 resource zones that I saw, that assumes that I'm starting and I just have Citrix Cloud managing everything. But what if I have this XenApp, XenDesktop investment that's been running on-prem for a long time, and I'm wanting to step into cloud, but I don't have time to just forklift move all that stuff or completely change the way I manage all that stuff. I want it to stay as it is until it's deprovisioned and done and we're completely transitioned to something else. But I want it all to show up inside of Workspace. That's where our site aggregation connectors can be added right here. So we can add that right in there. Your existing on-prem, without even being touched, can show up inside of Workspace. So now then, if we go back up here, everything is managed through the library, and this is how I published everything out to everybody. I do want to talk a little bit about web and SaaS applications. We have like 150 templates in there, and if I can figure this out, because I'm no SAML genius, trust me, anybody can figure this out. So I'll do a search for Office 365. You can see it found it. Click Next. Basically, I enter my URLs for it. If I have an inside app, I could choose that there. I'm just going to take the defaults because I'm not actually configuring it right now. But here is where all the security controls come on. And if you can't see it, when I tried to demo the clipboard access, I suspect I had that unchecked because it didn't work. So, and somebody could have been messing around in my demo environment. Once I understand that, basically, once I publish that, all those controls are on, and we're collecting analytics as people get access to them. So the other thing here is I now need to configure the SAML. Basically, I'm needing to know the assertion URLs, relay state, audience. I get those from Microsoft. Just FYI, some SaaS apps are different than others. I will tell you straight out of the box, Workday, I had going like that. Dan will tell you that on the Office 365, we had to execute some PowerShell against Azure AD to get that to work. And that's all documented very well. I hit save, and just like that, I'm done. The last thing I have to do is go out here, manage subscribers, and just say, hey, you know, I want these people in the WS user group or WS user names, which by the way are the user accounts for this roadshow, have access to it. So user group or by name, just like anything else, I click on it, they have access to it in their workspace or in their workspace. So that's how easy it is to do it. And that's the beauty of it. Within Citrix Cloud, you have everything that you manage within that one control plane.
So that's the workspace, and how do we wrap all of this up, and how do we control it from a network perspective? So as we kind of shift through that product stack and get into some of our networking technologies, what are we doing in terms of access? What are we doing in terms of security? Especially when it comes to, just give me a second actually. The coordination to switch between multiple laptops in a restaurant adds a little bit of complexity to a presentation.
Slideshow, there it is. Hello.
I think we can find it.
It's too bad the timing of the steaks coming out. We could give everyone like a second to
You know what, Dan?
second to eat.
Slideshow on here.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
can see that.
yeah, great fun. I think I got it here. This is the one we did last time. Right here. So we're actually at this one here, Kevin. Yeah, I'll take this. All right, there we go. All right, so wow. Nothing like a display issue, but I'll go ahead and show it. Okay, wow, our display issues are going crazy here. Right. So I'm going to go ahead and talk to this while Dan tries to figure it out. So when I did my demos, you'll notice that I used a Windows 10 device, okay? And by the way, I own this Windows 10 device. How did I get it? Well, Citrix has a BYO stipend. They actually give me a certain amount of money every couple of years to go buy whatever device I want to choose, and I'm one of these guys that takes it. I buy a bunch of devices because that's just the way I am. But anyway, the point is, how does Citrix know this is in compliance? How do they manage it? And we're starting to see more and more of that take place. What's going on with our display here?
How do you get back to
There you go.
You got it. Good. Okay. Thank you.
There you go.
Oh, thank you. So if you think about it, what we need to do is manage these devices, these laptops, if you will, and even some of our IoT things that are coming down the pipe, the same way that for years we have managed mobile phones and tablets, because they're mobile devices too. So we can do things like OS and patch management, app management, make sure security and compliance is in there, and do some certain provisioning of putting certain things on the device right out of the gate. So this is a screenshot of the Citrix Cloud environment, and just to kind of show you, rather than go back in there, all the different things here on the left that we can now manage, okay? And you can see that I've chosen Windows Desktop and Tablet. Now you can see all the different things that we can control, and this is on top of what Microsoft gives us as well, and you'll see that here in a minute. Because as I move forward to down here at the bottom, if you look under security, there's a thing called Windows Information Protection, which kind of brings me into the next demo. And this is the policy that basically says that these are the certain URLs and different applications on the desktop that I want to be able to save into secure containers. Now, for the sake of the demo you're about to see, you can see that I've got Notepad, iExplorer, Internet Explorer, OneDrive, so on and so forth. They are allowed to save and put things into the Windows protected container. Now, I'm completely not using any HDX in this next demo here. I went ahead and kick it forward and let it, oops, there it goes. See, it automatically starts to play. It's supposed to play. There it goes. Okay. So you'll notice that anytime that I have a device enrolled and I set those applications up in there, they now have a briefcase around them, which means that they're managed in secure apps. So it's kind of my work world on this device, and then I have my rest of world, kind of like we've done for years on the phone. Now I'm going to open Notepad. We're going to type in the word secure because this is something uber sensitive. And if I go to save that, you'll notice when I go to save as, that I have a different place where I can save it. Of course, I can save it onto the normal C, but you see this lock here. I can actually save that into the encrypted Windows Information Protected space. All right, so now I've saved that there. You can see it even shows up on the desktop. Encrypted, it's a work doc. You're not going to be able to do anything outside of the work environment with it. Well, let's open another Notepad. And let's take something in here, like this is public. It's not been saved into that space. I'm going to copy that. Yeah, I can paste that into that secure doc. That's no problem. What happens if I take secure and copy that and try to bring this into a public document that has not been saved into that space? Or even, what if I go to like a personal Yahoo email in this case and try to copy that there? That happens when people try to take confidential stuff out. You'll notice it says, I can't do that. That's because we were trying to pull content from something that had been saved into an encrypted space, an information protection space. So then you say, well, if I blocked it, well, what about on the same browser? What if I go to Office 365? Well, those previous policies on that busy slide I just showed you, it included Office 365 applications, even on the browser, as something that we could trust to be integrated with the Windows Information Protection. So you can see here that I can save that secure doc into there. So I'll move on to the next one, and we talk a little bit about our phones and our desktops, our phones, our tablets. And you might be looking at Intune as your endpoint management, and Citrix is right there along with Intune because we can bring a lot to the table to help this out. So I'm going to assume that my video is actually playing here on this one because it's got a long intro. But you'll notice here that on this iPhone there is an Intune browser up here, and there's also the Safari browser down here. And if you go to the Safari browser and you say, hey, I just want to go to the intranet, you're not going to get anywhere. And that's because, obviously, that intranet is an internal site. But if I open the Safari or the Intune browser, you can see it took me to the corporate intranet. And the reason is because that's the Citrix networking in the back end, the micro VPN. We've got hooks into Intune to allow that to happen. The other thing, of course, we bring to the table is our best of, I really think, best of breed productivity apps here, like Secure Mail and so on and so forth. So now then, let's say that we open Word, and I type something into Word that is sensitive, and I go to copy that out, and this is a Word app on an Intune managed device, right? And I go to throw that into Evernote because I'm going to leave the company and I want to take that whole list with me. Guess what? Can't be pasted there. It actually tells me I can't do that. But if I open our Secure Mail app, pin into it, that's a trusted app. And of course, in this particular case, yes, absolutely, I will be able to do that. So I'll be able to copy sales to, it's important, okay. Don't you love the way I type without actually typing? These videos are great. And I click paste, and there they are. All right? So the important takeaway with this demo is that on mobile devices, we integrate very tightly with Intune and extend Intune to be able to allow the internal network access, as well as to be able to lock down what Intune says is sensitive, to allow it to have access to some of the productivity apps that we bring to the space, which, by the way, on the app stores, our productivity apps are very, very highly rated for secure mail and stuff like that. It is my preferred way to do email from what it's worth. So turn it back over to you, Kevin.
So thinking of the workspace, and I jumped the gun with some of the networking pieces, but it starts at the endpoint. You might be facing challenges about laptops, BYOD, tablets, phones that all might be finding their way into the enterprise, into a user's source of applications, data, and productivity. You have the actual delivery of those apps, whether it be SaaS applications, whether it be virtualized Windows desktops or Windows applications, being able to control that potentially from multiple locations with multiple data sources. That is the workspace. And we are mutually invested with Microsoft in driving a modern workspace. And a lot of this is seen, which is some of our announcements around day one support for Server 2019. I actually have a customer that is embarking on that journey, kind of on the bleeding edge, and they can do that with today's VDA technology, with today's Citrix products. You also have day one support for Microsoft Virtual Desktop, using Citrix technology for the delivery of a Microsoft-hosted solution, fully wrapped in with Microsoft 365, as well as Azure infrastructure. We're actually kind of getting tight on time. Do you want to add something for MVP?
No, it's still, right now it's still in private preview, just to let everybody know. Hoping it comes out this quarter, hopefully this month actually, but in public preview.
Perfect. And yeah, I'm sorry to jump ahead a little bit, but I know we still want to cover a couple pieces on networking as well as analytics. So kind of jumping past just the standard marketing stuff. One of the things that we're really kind of doing with Microsoft, especially when it comes to software-defined WAN, is addressing the problem of hairpinning your network traffic from a branch for a SaaS application, specifically Office 365, through your data center. So say, for example, you have a data center in Houston and I'm running a refinery that's located, up in the middle of nowhere, like up in the middle of nowhere Pacific. I have to then route all of my Office 365 traffic through that private MPLS connection, up through my data center in Houston, hitting Office 365, driving down that interactivity between my location, my branch, and Azure, pulling that Office 365 information. What we do is we've partnered with Microsoft Virtual WAN to allow more direct connections from your branch office into Microsoft Azure, driving up performance, driving up responsiveness of Office 365.
One quick point on this: there's a lot of complexity when you try to do things like express route. I don't know how many people have tried to do an express route with Office 365. In fact, we tend not to let people do that. So this is a great alternative to that. Just throwing that out there. If you have been trying to do express route with Office 365, go with this instead.
So yeah, to Kevin's point, if you consider all the different POPs that Microsoft has for their solutions, like 130 something now, right? I forget what the exact number is, but there's all these different locations around the globe that I could be launching into with that Azure Virtual WAN solution and connecting up my network, right? And so now we can change that story and not necessarily having to hairpin things. So let's talk about what that kind of looks like from a traditional environment today. So most people, if they're doing some sort of a SD-WAN type of solution, this is pretty much what they're doing, right? I've got this branch appliance that sits there, I've got this head-end appliance in my data center, and I'm going to take an internet connection, put a VPN tunnel across it, and I've got this MPLS. I bind them together and I can send that traffic. And that works great if we're talking about traditional applications that are living in that data center, right? It all needs to go to my data center, great, done, terrific. The problem with that is what do we do now in this new world? Where our applications aren't necessarily living on premise anymore. Well, all of that data, all of that traffic is having to now hairpin through that data center. Because we've taken kind of this process of saying, you know, I need to secure this. We can do some things with ours that I'm going to talk about in a minute to change that story. But right now, that now becomes my bottleneck. I've got to make sure that internet connection out of that data center can handle all of this user traffic, especially when they're going to the stuff like Office 365 and Azure to get access to these resources. So to take that complexity even further, though, now I've got all of these branches, all of them doing this. It's not just this one spot anymore. So what we aim to do here is, through our SD-WAN technology, we can set up some policies that say, look, if I'm going to web-based apps, rather than leveraging that hairpinning through the data center, I'm just going to route that traffic directly out that SD-WAN appliance to the internet. So we've gone through here, we've set some stuff for a web-based CRM tool, but unfortunately we didn't have time to change the video to say dynamics. And to those Office apps, right? So now when those users go to access those O365 applications, it's not having to take that traffic, hairpin it through the data center. We've set up this policy, added this application object to say, if it triggers off of this, send it out to the internet directly. Don't hairpin it in my data center anymore. So what it ends up looking like is that traffic for those web and SaaS apps, that okay, we want to let them use Facebook, but we don't want to send all that Facebook traffic through the data center. Now I can leverage that internet connection. What's further is we partnered with other companies to provide web filtering on top of this. So if you've got concerns about even still sending that traffic out and you want to restrict it, we have some partners that we can talk to you about to be able to leverage their solution to also do your web content filtering on that outbound internet connection. So we have that capability as well. So now all of those different locations with the Azure Virtual WAN in place, now each of those locations can pick the POP closest to them to make that connection. They're not all kind of bound to this one spot anymore. So it's not necessarily just this one MPLS cloud and I've got to go in and hairpin all this stuff and it's still hitting one spot. No, it finds the one closest to it and it makes that connection rather than and what does that do for the end user? So this is a couple of videos. I will say that you'll see it click on the right first before it clicks on the one on the left. But the left is one that is not leveraging that. We still forgot to change that. Yeah, pretend you're in England for a moment. So you notice, you clicked on the PowerPoint, and it opened up pretty quick on the right. This is leveraging that Azure Virtual WAN to make that connection. We're sending that traffic directly into the Azure control plane to get access, rather than the data center hairpinning, right? So now it's waiting. And just to prove this out, see if it'll bring it up here if I hover over. It may not. Video's still running here. It didn't stop. Eventually this video will show, or the PowerPoint will load and you'll see it come to an end. So what does that do? So let's take that one more step. Let's click into it a little bit further. So we're running the assessment tool here, going to see what it might take to do a Skype or team call. We're seeing some pretty high latency here and packet loss. Okay? Pretty severe jitter. You're going to go open up this PowerPoint deck and we're going to say download it. And it's good, what does it say, about 31 minutes or so it's going to take. And let me do a search in Outlook, right? This is all leveraging technologies that are all hosted in Azure, right? This is all Office 365 or Azure hosted resources. So pretty cruddy experience in that perspective, right? Well, now with the Azure Virtual WAN in place, our latency is down to 13 milliseconds, and our packet loss is less than 1%. I think it's 0.1%. Right, yep. Let's go do that download again. It's gonna take 3 minutes instead of 31, right? And that search, as our UK friend put it, is delightful, right? So when we go back to that productivity side of things, as users are trying to do their jobs, what can we do to make that experience better? One way we talked about it is the workspace itself, right? We put it all in one spot, we reduce that 2 hours a day that users are just trying to find stuff. Okay, now I've got there, I know there's some healthcare customers in here, and I know that logon times being less than 10 seconds are things that we try to strive for. Well, if they have to pull that document down from the cloud for some, and in that case, what do we just do to that user's productivity, right? So there's some numbers, I'm not gonna quote them all, but ultimately it's about making the users more productive. And if we can leverage that control plane to get there faster, man, do it. I know there's several customers that are leveraging, he's probably got some examples too.
Yeah, and thinking of this too, and especially with some of the customers I've worked with when it comes to deploying Office 365, a lot of customers tend to shy away from that web experience. I want to do click to run, it's faster, it's more responsive, but that does, from what I understand, have licensing implications. For example, if I could shift users to a full web experience, potentially maybe I could save on some of the licensing costs associated with Office 365. Or think about the complexities that you may have run into if you're deploying Office 365 today with cached exchange mode. Maybe you can leverage online mode if you have better performance for certain use cases. So this doesn't just open up the possibilities of just providing a better user experience. This also gives you the opportunity to kind of look at your use cases and who's consuming Office 365 to make better adjusted business decisions around the type of licensing by driving better web performance. For these solutions, you can direct more users to the web version of the client, driving down some of the cost of the licensing, driving up efficiency, while also addressing user experience. So going from this, we have a lot of solutions here, and as Scott mentioned, when you go to Citrix Cloud, you have the content collaboration providing data, you have the access control service, you have the Citrix endpoint management service, you have NetScaler. All of these technologies are capturing data, capturing metrics, capturing information about how the user behaves and how the user acts. By taking all of these integration points from the overall user experience and being able to consolidate them in the cloud, it drives the ability to get end-to-end analytics in terms of the user experience, how they behave and how they access. What's the behavior of me as an end user? Am I always connecting from home? What happens if that behavior changes? Suddenly, I'm always connecting from home. Suddenly, I connect from, a foreign entity. I might fail my authentication a couple times because I'm trying to do a brute force login attack. I access the network, I break through, I get data. You're potentially reacting to that instead of being proactive. So being able to capture this information holistically and leverage capabilities like Azure Machine Learning through how we built analytics, you can leverage risk scoring. I can understand how I as an end user typically behave, and if I suddenly stray away from that, especially in ways that might indicate some form of security risk, you could score me as an end user and be proactive to that issue rather than reactive. This also applies to cases around performance, operations. What's the holistic look at my application usage across all of my resource locations in my organization? Maybe there are some applications that we've been supporting for quite some time that